Well, hello there and welcome everyone to the Advisor's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jacoman. And once again, we are here. Chad and I are solo together. We don't have a guest on, but we are excited because we have a super exciting show for you. Today, we're going to do the year-end review. Like what's going on? What happened this year?
Yeah.
What can we look forward to next year? And Chad is going to do something really cool. He's going to get out his little crystal ball. And he's going to look out he's going to project out in the future, and he's going to share with us some insights of what he sees the market, what's the market doing, where things are going in the insurance industry as it relates to the financial advisory space, and some other really cool things related to AI and compliance and technology and innovation and some other cool stuff. But Chad, what do you think about that agenda?
Well, it makes me think of our clients as like, we have no crystal balls, but also one of my clients says, Chad, what we do is we plan, and we need to plan, and then life happens. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I do see some interesting things going on there, and I'm glad to share that with you. And then we'll make a good plan, and we'll see what happens in 2025. But 2024 was an adventure for sure. At least it was for here in the insurance industry and Box Professional and all of that. So,
well, let's start at the top. And what I wanted to learn from you, Chad, and maybe you could share with everybody here is in 2024, let's really start with the beginning, because there was a lot of things that were going on in the marketplace, especially early on in the year. I know like around January, February, we had the New York regulations that came out with cybersecurity. That was a big push for a while. That kind of dictated, a lot on the financial advisory space in certain states. Like that really pushed them in a certain direction. So it's really interesting the way the market works and kind of how compliance and the market kind of converge together. And it's interesting to see all that play out as an observer and watching the way you guys are doing things. Talk a little bit about the state of the market in 2024 on the insurance side and how it's really impacted the financial advisory space.
Yeah. So it has been absolutely fascinating with the New York DFS ruling, and making sure what was happening there. The rules were put into place in late 2023. They really started to come into play in 2024. So we saw the advisors that were understanding what was happening and most of these were in New York, but the ways those requirements were worded is that if you did work business in New York as an advisor or an insurance agency, is pretty broad when they're talking about financial services. So we got kind of swept up in that too, with things that we needed to do to bring things up to speed. The good news is there's tools that have been built and are being improved upon that simplify that and make it easier, making sure you have a great compliance firm. And there's also some good compliance firms out there that are really good at that cyber component of it in and of itself. We've continued to see the cyber specific audits from the SEC. Okay. And on a state-by-state basis, New York is still the leader in really making sure everything's being done as best as possible. But what's driving a lot of that, and I think one reason New York is in the leader of that is because, New York is a financial capital, if you will. Their arrows are out and people are shooting at everybody they can. The bad guys are trying to get into the systems, and it's an arms race between the two. So it's interesting to watch as the regulators try and manage that as best they can. Now, as we take that through and these things are getting put into play as you get towards the end of the year, and then you have the election. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about the election, but it's a reality of life, right? It's a change of administration. When I was at Schwab Impact, there was some interesting conversations I had with some longtime underwriters about that and what they think is going to happen out there. We don't really know. And usually what we think is not what's going to happen. Advisors know this better than anybody because
that's true.
It's interesting world. So let me back up a little bit. Insurance in its entirety, because of course we know there's been fires on the West and hurricanes in the Southeast and all kinds of things hitting the property casualty space, and it's gotten really difficult. They call it a hard market, where it's harder to get it underwritten. It's more expensive. It's painful in the insurance market. Okay. That's in property, casualty, personal, and business lines. Now, what's unique about the professional space, specifically in RIA space, is that it's not a hard market. It's pretty much the opposite of what you see out there. Now, at some point, it's going to get harder. And the way we know what precedes it getting to make it a harder market is volatility in the stock market. But if you look back over the last 10 years, the stock market's been absolutely awesome, and so claims are down. Also, we had a mandate a few years ago from custodials starting to require coverage for financial advisors. That means a lot more entrance into the market. Okay, that was really absorbed a few years ago, but now we're starting to see the effect of that, which has softened up the market. We have some new carriers that have come into the market the effect of that is, so I started about 13 years ago helping advisors. The minimum premium that was 13 years ago is essentially the same minimum premium we see for an RIA today. What's interesting to me about that, and we got financial folks, we've seen a lot more inflation than that. So the effective cost of coverage for an advisory firm has gone down. Now, I can say that,
right?
It is good news. It is good news. It is good news for clients. And part of that's because there's a lot more people buying the insurance, okay, because they have to. Nobody likes to have to, but that's what we want to see. Now, the other thing that's happening from a regulatory standpoint, we don't know how it's going to look. We have an idea because it's not a brand new administration. They were here 4 years ago, right? But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, because the underwriters are trying to figure out, does this mean there's going to be a little bit reduction in regulatory requirements, or are they going to get really picky in certain areas, or just pull back altogether? We don't know that yet. Good news, I think, personally, hopefully in the crypto space, we start getting some clarity around some of that. There can be some really good things that come out. For carriers, it got really interesting when we talked about, okay, in EPLI, employment practices coverage, what's going to happen there? Is that going to start to become less of an issue? Is the premiums, how are they going to be affected there? If the claims go down, that should pull back some of the premium pressure on that, which would actually probably be a good thing. But when you're looking at it, the thing to remember about insurance, it's the law of large numbers all the time. These things move slowly and they kind of migrate one direction or another. Even if there's a quick change, because, you have one change from one administration to another, that's a relatively quick change and it'll happen again at some point, right? But as that happens, carriers are slow to react. But what we're watching for is, if we get a pullback in the market and the volatility goes up, more likely than not, claims will go up, the market will harden up. What you want to do, and what I'd really encourage you to do to look at for 2025, is do that review. Make sure you're getting the best in class terms you can now, because when claims starts to hit, carriers are very cautious. Underwriters are very cautious. You're not going to get as good of terms as you can today.
That's a really interesting perspective. Now, can you go back for a minute? Because this is actually this ties into my question on this, because I think this is a really important point to hit home. When you see fluctuations in the marketplace, the impact that has on claims, and therefore how that also affects how underwriters look at the markets and the situation and how they're trying to make adjustments, and things don't happen always as fast as they should. But it's interesting to see the dynamics that are occurring here. So what you're saying is, whenever there's changes either politically or geopolitically or the market forces, all these different things can impact how the market responds, and therefore how your coverages and your contracts could get built out depending on what happens actually in the marketplace. So that's really interesting, that I don't think a lot of people think about, is all those dynamic forces that are going on and how you really have to play the game and anticipate some of those things. And this is why I think it's so critical to work with a specialist. This is my argument for working with somebody in the industry, specifically in the insurance industry, that is an industry niche specialist. And obviously I'm not advertising for a Box Professional, but I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are an RIA or you're in the financial services space, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of working with an expert, a specialist who understands the nuances of your business model, the market forces, how underwriting affects potentially how your coverages are structured. This is the critical piece. This is the critical place we come to whenever there is a change, either a hard market, soft market, doesn't matter. This is why I feel it's so important to work with somebody who's been in your shoes, who's been on your side of the table as if they were your partners in helping you better manage risk for your organization. So I wanted to put that out there that I've been in this industry almost 2 decades of my career. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to work with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and what they're doing specifically for your industry. So there's my little...
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob. I mean, and one of the things at Box Professional, here's something that's going to come up. The whole point is that we're at a unique time where underwriters, now I've only been doing this 13 years. The underwriters that have been doing this a little bit longer are telling me it's uniquely soft right now. And some underwriters are saying, it's probably going to be soft for maybe a year or 2 longer. But guess what happens? Time closes up quick. Things can happen that we don't expect. Okay. Yep. Next spring, what we're going to have, and we'll maybe have a podcast on this, but as the numbers come in from the ADV updates and the year kind of wraps up, we actually measure claims against the S&P, the weekly close.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, and we learn some really interesting things and see how these over time, because here's the great thing about working with financial advisors. They're good at reading charts. Mm-hmm. And so that's an interesting thing to know. A lot of what's been happening this is what it feels like. And a lot of what's been happening in 2024 is kind of a setup for something else to happen in 2025. Now, some of that we know what's going to happen as far as who the administration is going to be. Volatility in the world, if it's Ukraine or whatever's going on in South Pacific or China or whatever, those fortunately don't affect us a whole lot unless they really affect the financial markets.
Yeah.
Now, we have literally advisory firms that are all over the world. Okay. So it kind of changes that perspective a little bit, but largely speaking, because, it's all in the US, financial advisors is where our focus is. It's a good opportunity to look at that. What else? Shoot, I got to say.
The other thing I was going to ask you about is, can you shed some light a little bit if you were to open up the hood of what the carriers are doing and what are some new entrance into the carrier space in terms of MGAs? Anybody who doesn't know what an MGA is, if you're listening or watching right now, these are managing general agents. These are very industry niche specialty types of organizations that are kind of like a carrier, but are intermediary between a carrier and a broker. These guys a lot of times will create specialized products that are custom tailored to that industry. So talk a little bit about, Chad, some new entrants into the marketplace. Who are some partners that you guys are working with that are really giving advisors a more competitive advantage because you have access to some of those specialty markets and why that's so unique?
Yeah. So one of the big gorilla in the room, if you will, in the insurance side for RIAs, especially if you're a plain vanilla type firm, is Markel. Okay. If you're looking at insurance and your advisor, that name has probably come up for you. They're a great carrier, but they're not the answer to everything. And one of the best, I'm a capitalist. Okay. I think markets are good. Good competition, healthy competition is good because it helps bring out the best in hopefully everyone. And it gives options for clients. But what's happened is there's a really good carrier out there like Berkeley. They're big in the banking sector. In the last few years, with all the consolidation in banking, they needed more premium. So they said, hey, we're going to explore, and they pivoted. And this year they're coming on pretty strong with a product built specifically for advisors. One of the unique things that's happened kind of in the MGA sort of space in the insure tech type space is everybody's trying to figure out how to use these new tools better. And so there's some organizations out there that are incorporating some reviews, some automated reviews to be able to compare insurance contract language and also put together quotes, get quotes faster. One of the most frustrating things that here's the good news. In 2024, what I see is there's people starting to figure out how to use some of these AI tools better, because it's all about, now that computers essentially understand language. And when we're talking about insurance, it's literally words on paper. It's not developed yet, but there are things developing that are going to help make it easier to evaluate and clarify to make sure you are getting best in class terms. So it's quite fascinating to see how that's developing. The first place I saw it happen was in the cyberspace. I don't know if that's because they're more tech forward, but there's a couple out there that are a wholesale broker actually that built a tool that's able to get quotes for cyber coverage much, much faster than ever have before, much more simple. And when I say fast, I'm talking about within 24 hours. Now, sometimes it comes through quicker than that. The interesting thing that I think is helpful for listeners to know is this insurance is not like your auto insurance. Okay. In the auto insurance space, it's a lot simpler. It's standardized by ISO. This coverage is not. But one of the things that's happened, that's a lot more, I should say, mature market in a sense, because you have functionality in the background where an agent can go in there and pull up your DMV information and plug that all in, and everything kind of aligns, and they can get a quote in seconds or minutes, right? Mm-hmm. In this space, they're starting to get to the point where we're getting closer to that with cyber coverage. But when it comes to your E&O coverage, even for your plain vanilla RIAs, it still takes days, sometimes weeks to get quotes. If you're doing a more complicated situation where you have a private fund or something like that, it's going to take a lot longer. And the reason is because on all of it, they're manually underwriting this. Okay. Now the tools are being developed to help make it quicker, but there's still, it's got to be done manually, because this is coverage that isn't, look, when you look at that chart that I was talking about, the claims are not frequent. It's not like auto insurance where you have claims fairly often. It's more like homeowners insurance where you might have a claim once every 20 years. When claims come into play in this space, not frequently, but they're really expensive. Okay. And the way that relates back to this year is because there's been fewer claims, the expenses are down. But when that switch flips, you're going to see a lot of claims come in real fast. The experienced underwriters know that. And what you're going to see is a quick hardening of the market. You want to review it before you get there. So these are year-end review stuff, is to say it's been a good year. It's going to set up to be very fascinating for 2025, because I think what we're going to see is we're going to see both insurers work to streamline their systems so they can get better quotes out faster. I can tell you that's not going to happen very quick, because it's a lot of people working very hard, but these systems are well entrenched. And let's face it, carriers aren't known for tech forward. Okay.
No, not at all.
So, but there will be development. And when we get to the end of 2025, it's going to be interesting to look back and see how these AI tools are better being used for specific situations.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think it's a great time here to wrap up, because I think, Chad, what you've done is you've given an amazing overview. I want to just add one thing, my perspective, and I know you won't talk about yourself like this, but I can say BPI has really come a long way in 2024. I've seen you guys create some incredible tools internally to help streamline, make things more efficient, deliver an incredible customer experience. And I feel like that's what you guys are doing better than anybody else, and that you are actually intentional about how you think about delivering that experience. And a lot of people don't know the cool things that you guys are working on, which we can probably talk about in another episode, but you guys are actually leveraging AI in a very unique way to better streamline that experience with your customers, give them a better user experience, and produce better results for them at the end, and really enhancing that experience. And that's personally what I've seen in 2024. You guys have really upped your game in that regard. And I think there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you guys are going to be a major force, and are currently a major force in the industry, and providing that enormous value to an already incredible industry that I personally love myself, and love working with you guys too. So no one really knows often, because we don't talk about it, how incredible your team is behind the scenes, but you guys are doing some amazing work. And I just wanted everybody to know that.
Well, thank you. We're grateful to be working in the advisory space because that's the best thing is I joke it's we basically get to interview advisors all day long. But we're, and there's the one other thing, Advisor's Edge. We got to team up with you, Rob, to do Advisor's Edge. So that's probably one of the most exciting, fun things to happen, at least for me personally this year. So thank you.
I love it. Well, guys, listen, thank you so much again for joining us today on the Advisor's Edge podcast. Again, our hearts, our spirit is in this to just be of value to you and give back to you guys. And we'd love in return, if you found value today, please consider subscribing and being part of our community and our family here. And we're just going to keep dedicating ourselves to that mission and that purpose. And guys, in 2025 and beyond, keep crushing your goals, keep reaching for the stars, keep going after your dream, because it is possible. Anything is possible. And we're living proof of that, aren't we, Chad?
Yes, sir. We're very, very blessed.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Advisor's Edge podcast. We'll see you on the other side.